Well, howdy, folks. Welcome back to KC Grid Talk. My name is Kaleb Vieska, and joining me here tonight, it's going to be my two very special co-hosts, Emory Lyda and Alexander Searle. But good to see you all back here for another episode 19, I believe, of KC Grid Talk here this weekend. And we're just wrapping up the Stars Championship Series on what was a great weekend of racing where we saw Henry Wheeler take the win in OKN Stars, and then Billy Musgrave, the All-American badass, taking the win there as well. But without further ado, let's invite my co-host in here, firstly with Emory Lyda, who was on site as well. Emory, a couple of days without seeing you. How you been? How was the weekend for you?
Yeah, it's a pretty good weekend. I mean, first off, on stream, I feel like we had a pretty good amount of good racing at at Cincinnati. Really, pretty much every class had some intriguing storyline to follow over the course of the weekend. And I mean, of course, the Motorsports Country Club at Cincinnati, one of the best facilities out there in the United States. So it was great being back again, even though it's only been a couple of weeks for on my end of things. I know, Caleb, you've been stuck up in Ohio for a while more, so it was kind of another weekend for you. But for me, it was good to be back. Good times at the racetrack. We went to Kings Island afterwards. I rode roller coasters for the first time in 11 years. So altogether, really good weekend, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, and then we have a guy who is just tall enough to meet the height requirements at Kings Island, the one and only Alexander Searle. All jokes aside, though, Alex, we had a good time, obviously, at the end of the day Sunday, but we got to get through all the racing action first, right? And you were there on pit lane all weekend long, bringing us all the intel and I guess every bit of update that we needed. So how was the weekend for you?
It was good. It was a great weekend. I think on our end as well, things went really smooth, which is always a good thing for us when nothing goes wrong, especially with the heat outside of Cincinnati. I think all of us were kind of worried at some point that we were going to have some overheating issues, but that never happened. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
And then on track racing was awesome from start to finish. The finals were great. And then like Emory said, Kings Island afterwards couldn't have been much better.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a great time. The only thing that I guess I was, I guess, a little skeptical about was so Kings Island has a really famous ride made out of complete wood called the Beast, and it's very well known for being rode in the dark. I, at 20 years old, am a little scared of the dark. Funny enough, because it's just scary. You know, you don't know what's out there, and you can't see 5 feet in front of you, 5 feet to your right or 5 feet to your left. So it was pitch black whenever we'd go through some of those tunnels, but it was definitely a great time, and spending some, I guess, some downtime with the crew was always a good time.
Yeah, I also want to say I want to declare war on the mosquitoes at Cincinnati, because let me tell you, across the 3 days of sitting and producing, I think I probably got a total like 25 bites on my legs and arms, and that's with bug spray too. If I had not, if I'm not sprayed myself, I would have been rough. So as good as Kings Island was, as good as the racetrack action was, the one downside was the mosquitoes. But hey, that didn't dampen our weekend. We still made magic, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, this is a double podcast. So once we finish up around 8:50ish Eastern time, 7:50 where I'm at, Xander Clements will go on for his podcast as well with Kyle Cuthbertson. So they'll be on later on tonight. But we have a lot to talk about. Firstly on our show, and we go straight to last weekend with the Star Championship Series. I mentioned it a little bit. It was a really big weekend for racing. The paddock was, jam packed. I remember getting there on the Friday morning, and we really couldn't find a place to park. I mean, you boys were riding with me as well, and whenever we'd get there, and it was really you definitely couldn't mess up the parking because it was going to mess it up for everybody else. So it was definitely something seeing that paddock that packed. On that day, I believe it was around 240 entries, if I'm not mistaken, boys. Correct me if I'm wrong. 240.
Yeah, somewhere between 240 and 250 was the number I heard.
Yeah, but I mean, we had some big racing. Obviously, some red flag incidents as well, unfortunately. And best of wishes to some of one of the MPG boys who was hurt at the end of his incident. So we send him the best of wishes and wish him a speedy recovery. Hope to see him at the racetrack sometime soon. But yeah, a lot to debrief, boys. What are some of the things that stood out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, first off, before I get into a lot of the on-track action, I mean, like you kind of got into it with Charlie Myers of MPG Motorsports, one of the kids that I think is one of the kind of brightest stories in the karting paddock. Always has a smile when you see him around, and it was really heartwarming on John Antonino's front bumper. And I believe one of the front bumpers that ended up getting sent to Charlie, they had a list of all of the MPG Motorsports tent that signed
Yeah.
it. So really, really cool to see the karting community and the MPG Motorsports boys coming together, and hope to see Charlie back in a race and in a karting paddock sometime soon, because again, you always hate to see those sorts of incidents, and to see Charlie hopefully in good spirits would be an awesome thing. But as far as the on-track action goes, I think it was kind of a tale of the grip that the track had, and in general, kind of how that was something that a lot of people had to get used to. A lot of people had to get used to kind of the new Rhino liner that's been put down, the fact that there was 4 weeks of rubber on the racetrack, um, and the amount of temperature that was on the track as well meant that the conditions were further gripped up than pretty much we've ever seen in the last decade of American karting, or the last 7 or 8 years at least of American karting. So I think that's the main storyline for me, was just how gripped up the track got and how that threw a lot of people for the loop. But then on the shifter side, I think we were treated to a really good racing weekend as well, with Billy Musgrave and Jay Irwin going at it, AJ Myers coming through the field, Michael Riccio, at least through the heats, coming through the field, and tons of other storylines that I think really made the shifter class one of the best events of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
for me, I think it was the story of the feel-good winners. I mean, finally, Overbeck gets over that hump in senior. We had Billy come back after 400+ days of a winless streak for him. OKN, we had Henry Wheeler, which is another, just the paddock is always happy when that guy wins. So I think in on track, we had Bergman win. Unfortunately, got a penalty, but for Josh Bergman to go get that mini win was awesome. Antonino, we had an incredible drive from Zane Burgess to go from last to P2, almost won the race. So yeah, feel good winners, feel good, runner ups, I should say, with Zane Burgess.
Decent Kavinsky as well.
Kavinsky, incredible performance. Also, really good interviewer. Easton
Yeah.
Kavinsky, awesome interviewer for how young he is, and one of his first interviews on Kart Chasers. I'm sure many to come this year for Kavinsky.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely is. Whenever we, Alex, myself, and Emory, we've all been in it. Whenever you interview one of those kids and they give you a spot-on interview right from the get-go, it's definitely something that kind of surprises you a little bit, right? Just have that little bit of natural kind of talent to be behind a microphone. So it was good to see Easton do that, and it wasn't easy. He went up there in the field and then got pushed back just out on the edge of the top 5, a little bit further away from that lead group, and then right at the end. Right, there was a little bit of a gap to him and Zane, and then in the last 2 corners, Easton was able to close it back down and take the win there on the line. And that was one of the craziest races. I think one of the best races that we saw all weekend long. It was really good, and those kids absolutely delivered. But yeah, James Overbeck broke his, I guess you can say, winless streak or streak of
defeated the allegations.
He beat the allegations. I think it's safe to say, and I'm kind of mad at James right now because he would be on the show with us, but I think he went on a date with his girlfriend I saw on Snapchat. So that's unfortunate that he's not here with us talking about racing, because who wouldn't want to be here right now, right? Talking about racing all night. No, but in all seriousness, congrats to James, and good to see he's kind of decompressing on what I bet was a stressful weekend for him. He was in the wall in qualifying. I believe somebody just blew up right in front of him, and was in the wall, changed suits, put on the Coyote Precision Performance Karting suit on, and then just kind of drove his way.
Not only in the wall though,
yeah.
he put it on pole.
Yeah, and he put it on
pole.
Yeah.
He backs it into the wall because the driver in front of him, it happened right in front of me. Lap 1, right after I spoke to him on the grid saying, I'm impressed you've kept the suit on all day, the black BJR offset suit that has seemingly brought him up and down results. I told him, listen, I think the solution to it all is he needs to get it sewn together, because the black suit, I think, gives him a lot of pace and no luck. The blue suit is a lot of overall race pace and some good luck. So if you sew them together, it might work out. But I spoke to him on the grid. I'm like, dude, you kept the suit on. He's like, yeah, I haven't wrecked yet. And then he didn't finish. He just finishes the outlap of qualifying, backs it on the wall, proceeds to do 2 laps. I think it was 2. I think the 3rd lap got taken away, but 2 laps that were good enough for pole position. Unreal pace all weekend for him.
by
Yeah.
2/10 too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a KA senior class.
Like the difference between Overbeck and P2 in that qualifying session, I believe, was the same difference between P2 and I want to say P7 or 8. So like
Absurd.
that was, and we checked it on the, or we were there when they checked it on the frame table. It was not completely straight. It was a bit bent.
Yeah.
Now, not enough to make a difference or like a big difference, but Thiago was, if James had not qualified in the top 10 or 15, Thiago probably would have made a bit of money off of that chassis.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, most definitely. But I actually remember after that qualifying session walking in to the BJR MDR10 and going to James, and I was like, dude, don't even touch it. Don't even take it at Tiago. That thing is wicked quick. Don't even mess with it. Don't touch it. Don't bend it back to how it was, whatever. And he was like, I know, dude. Like, it was so quick, this and that. But yeah, I get to see that. And I mean, you were talking, Alex, I think reminded me of something super important that I actually wanted to apologize for. You mentioned talking to James, and then he later proceeded to back it into a wall. Myself, yourself, and Xander all kind of commentators cursed, I think, a record number of drivers this weekend.
It was so
after
bad.
talking good about them, for 2 laps, and then the next lap they're either in a wreck or they're in the wall or something.
It happened to
unfortunate.
It happened to us, Eli Warren. I remember we interviewed Eli Warren before the second heat race, and then as Xander is saying, "Can we believe the drive this guy is on?" and then he's broken down entry to turn number 4. It happened to me. I joined the booth for the micro race, and then Jack Katowski, right as I'm saying, "What a great drive for Jack."
Yeah,
he goes off the racetrack at turn 4.
Yeah.
And there's a couple more. I think there's a couple shifter guys that had issues.
I think it was Joe Ruck for me, Vincenzo
in the second heat. We were like,
yeah,
needs a great rebound or needs a great drive after heat number 1, running in like 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
Cut to him in the 3rd sector, completely off the track and out of the race.
Jay Irwin, actually, if you listen to Xander talking, he's like, "Yeah, no, I don't think we're gonna be able to catch this kid. He's in the wall in the final."
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I think we need to just. We can't praise anybody. That's it. That's simple as that. Because it was unreal. You actually couldn't make it up. Like sometimes, the commentator curse. It happens because you talk about so many drivers. It's bound to happen once a weekend. But I mean, I could probably think of 5 or 6 top of my head, and those must have been more than 10.
Yeah, it was quite a few.
I think the solution is we just throw music on the broadcast the whole time and don't say anything. Let it all play out.
Yeah, either that or we gotta. It was Chase Gasly was one of the ones for me too. So sorry about that, Chase. I think in the final, and I don't know if Chase broke in the pre-final as well, but it was some crazy stuff going on. So I apologize, Chase, but yeah, it was something. Definitely not what you want to see from us, but we move on. We have a long show ahead of us. One of the big things that we kind of talked about this weekend, especially going into the Stars race, the OKN Stars specifically, is how do we build that OKN midfield? We know the front runners are super strong with the likes of Massimino, Gaffera, and Diego Ramos, Henry Wheeler, and a couple of other drivers that were in there. But whenever you look at that field up and down and through it, across all 16, how do we build kind of the depth in that field? Because whenever you look at either an X30 field or whenever you look at the shifter field, even this weekend for the Stars Championship Series, they have a pretty strong midfield with the likes of, I'm not going to go on and on, but they have a strong midfield. And one of the questions whenever we got into it here this past weekend is how do you build that OKN midfield and kind of get more clients to buying that OKN package and to going in to race that OKN package? Emory, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of explain the core issue in detail, this past weekend in OKN, there were, I think, 16 total entries. And of those 16, you had the top 6 in the final of Henry Wheeler, Diego Ramos, Nick Terlecki, Paulie Massimino, Austin Olds, and Kaleb Gaffera. Their lap times were within 2/10 or so, which is kind of what you would expect the front spread to be. But then when you get back into the next segment of drivers, there was really only 3 drivers the whole weekend that kind of had that midfield pace, so to speak, right? And obviously they won't want to be known as midfielders. That's not how the ideal, or that's not how a driver wants to be seen as. But ultimately, the drivers like Alex Feldstein, we saw James Brazel, we also saw Josh Oates and Adam Marinko throughout the weekend. They were closer to 5 to 6 tenths of a second off of the pace per race, which in a normal weekend, an X30 weekend, you would see them towards kind of in a field with probably 10 or 15 other carts around that point. If you look at the KA midfield, if you're 5 or 6 cents off, you're there with 20 other go-karts. In OKN, though, it's 2 or 3 guys in that time span. And then you have a few guys towards the back of the field that are on much less competitive packages or much less competitive on the lap time side of things. So the issue with that is, to me, when you get into a race like the final, you kind of have the front of the field, which is can naturally get spaced out just because of the high level that these guys are racing at, and the pace kind of stacks on top of each other with the limited draft effect of the OKN. And then you have a second pack that is basically non-existent. Like if you look at the gaps from the final, you pretty much have the top 4, which broke away, and obviously the battling in the last couple of laps changed kind of the complexion of that pack. But those 4 end up 3, 5, and 6 seconds back, respectively. Olds was not far back. And then you basically had a spread out race of Gaffaro was 11 seconds back, Feldstein was 14, James Brazel was a full 15 seconds behind the next closest finisher in 7th position. Sutter Gabriel and ZCD finished 9th and 10th, and they were 31 and 34 seconds back from the race lead at the end of the race. To me, that's not a natural gap. And how do we fix it is kind of the main core question. And for me, it comes down to ultimately a lot of guys won't want to take the risk on the OKN package without some kind of incentive. It's an engine that is completely foreign to a lot of drivers. You can ask a lot of the new OKNJ drivers and a lot of the OKN drivers from last year, and the off throttle time, kind of the conception, the kind of concept of being able to drive in a package that lets you, or that is a direct drive and has kind of that different kind of power band as well, and having to do the push starts, having to manage the off throttle where you can't get all the way off the throttle in one go, and you really can't get on the gas right away. It's a big learning curve. And so you have to give them an incentive to build that up. For me, that incentive, I think, would be building an engine packet, or building like an engine incentive at the end of the season, right? So if you were to win a KA packet, or if you were to win KA Senior this year, KA Stars, or finish in the top 3, you have the right to essentially a free OKN entry for the next year, and possibly, even if you're the champion, an OK engine claim, where you can get a stock OKN engine that you can then OKN that they would partner through whoever Stars would like to build them, or they have their choice of the engine brands. Because the OKN not having a set manufacturer is one of the biggest things that I also think inherently draws people back, because they don't have a great knowledge of who to go to with it. So there's a couple things there. I think you have to build in an incentive. You have to kind of give people more of a reason to play it out, whether it be increased price structure from 1st down to 10th, like we see Pro Tour doing, kind of a free entry package, but specifically to OKN, I think would help with that as well. But ultimately, you need to find a way to get the engine more accessible to people and more enticing. And that starts with encouraging people through incentives, and also as well, just kind of building up the awareness and the understanding of the engine as a series. I feel like kind of would help with sort of easing the transition for newcomers, because ultimately the price isn't that much different than an X30 or a KA package would be.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. And I know, Alex, you have a point as well. But while we're on kind of like this topic, and I really think I actually mentioned this to someone around the paddock as well on the during the weekend. I can't remember who, but Emory brings up a really good point, right? I think the Stars Championship Series is one of the series where you actually don't get prize money if you win a race. At the end of the year, if you win the championship, you get kind of scholarships for the Lucas Oil School of Racing, and then Mazda Motorsports.
Yeah, the champion is an automatic bid into the Spec MX5 Challenge shootout, and then the runner-ups are a entry to the Winter Series for Lucas Oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big things, right? And as compared to the United States Pro Kart Series, you get money whenever you win a race, whenever you finish on the podium in a race. Same thing with SCUSA. They're giving away, I believe, $10,000 to the champion at the end of the year for X30 Pro, and if I'm not mistaken, Shifter as well. So I think Emory brings up a good point, and I'll really say it a little more bluntly than I guess Emory, kind of alluded to it. If we want to see the OKN class grow, we need to start throwing prize money at the engine package. We need to start throwing prize money in the series that runs that engine package, and I think that's really going to bring up either the level in the field as well. And I'm not saying the level's low, because it's hard to win an OKN race, and it's definitely not easy. None of us could do it. Well, Emory probably could. I definitely can't.
Not right now.
Anyways,
I'd need a bunch of testing to get there.
yeah, no, but it's hard. What I'm saying, the shifter class is hard, but I really think we need to start rewarding some of these drivers for the races that they've had. Billy Musgrave definitely. I had a really, really good race, and it wasn't easy, and it was hard, and whatever. Our drivers should be rewarded because they are spending a lot of money to get out to the racetrack, to travel. Billy Musgrave, even to get his operation out there, he's a one-man team, but has to spend money on flights and whatnot. And at the end of the day, we'd like to see some of these drivers rewarded. The KA drivers as well. It's a little bit of a different story when you get to the younger classes, because you want to keep the fun in it, and you want to keep kind of the the money hungry aspect of doing it at such a young age kind of out of it. But still, you want to see our senior drivers rewarded a little bit, even because of whatever they spent to get out there, entries and whatnot. You want to see a little bit get them back. And if we're going to have a pro show, especially in some of those, if we're going to call it a pro show, I think we need to kind of reward these drivers to be going out there and racing like pros.
Yeah, you guys both alluded to probably the biggest issue we have, and that is, not enough prize money or at all. The scholarships are really cool. 100% the scholarships are awesome.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be prize money. I think the knowledge of the engine package is a big deal. I think the accessibility of the engine package is a big deal, or lack of, should I say. I think having there be more than one, distributor, not great for the engine, not great for people that, are investing their money into a pretty new package. I think the other issue, if we're talking about how to grow the midfield, and this goes beyond the midfield, this is just how to grow the package. There needs to be more series that have this package in it, whether it's regional, whether it's club stuff. With just mainly Stars being one of the only series in the country that runs OKN, why would drivers want to buy it, right? So I think Stars does a great job in promoting it. I think the scholarships are awesome for drivers looking for that next step into cars. And so for Mazda, for Lucas Oil, they've done a great job promoting all that. I know Lucas Oil was at the racetrack today. Mazda obviously was at the track of Charlotte. They put all the flags out there. They do a great job. And being, Mazda ambassador in the past myself, like they put on an incredible scholarship program. But with limited series carrying this engine package, it's more of a risk for a driver, especially a midfield driver that may lack budget to do more than one series, or do, two different packages, whether maybe they're a SCUSA driver or a PKS driver, and they want to hop into a Stars race and run a different engine package. That's another engine they have to buy, maybe not another chassis, but another engine they have to buy and learn. And so it adds to the amount of testing time they have to do, which is going to cost you money. But we all know that practicing is different than racing. And so with limited racing time under a driver's belt in a certain engine package, you are really not as knowledgeable as a team like PSL. And with PSL being one of the only teams, like I think Fox and Sun, a couple others, are running a 2 or more driver, combination in the OKN field. PSL is really strong this weekend. They've really figured it out. It's intimidating. I wouldn't, me personally, if I didn't have enough experience in the OKN package, I wouldn't want to hop in right now and go race. Yeah. It's intimidating. Yeah. And so I think, one more thing, I think, again, if we can have club, regional, even another national series, but I think that's not going to happen, but a lot of regional series, if they could pick it up on a more consistent basis rather than the K and the X30, which is more common, that's going to help the midfield.
Yeah. And one other thing to piggyback off of what you were talking about with prize package, Alex, I got to look at my own example when it comes to if I was racing stars this year and I was in position to run up front at the championship, what would give me the most value? A Lucas Oil scholarship or a MX5 challenge bid would be great, but at the same time, for guys like myself or someone like Billy Musgrave or someone even in OKN like Josh Oates, like they're not suddenly going to become a car racing superstar at 25, 26, even up to the 30s as Billy is in. Like it just simply won't happen. So you're taking a package that ultimately is only enticing to people that have kind of a future in car racing. Not to say that there isn't value in that. I mean, it's a really cool package, and I do have to applaud Mazda and Lucas Oil for the work that they've done to kind of bring their partnership into the series and how the series has kind of marketed it as well. Like it's a really cool thing, but it's kind of one of the things that you look back at how USPKS did it a few years ago, which again, not to say that they had the perfect example of this, they have their own flaws in the prize structure back in the day as well, but they had a system where if you were in the top 5 in the championship, you could choose among like the 5 levels of prizes, and there was a couple that were monetary and there were a couple that were kind of more experience focused. And granted, all of those were karting centered. It was more like winner circle entry, like full season entry to the next year, or an engine, or there was kind of a monetary option as well. I think having that's the right example, because until we get to the point where we're putting money on the table and we have a field that is racing for money and knows that there's money on the table, you can't really call it a pro OKN field. The shifter field is great, right? The shifter field has no issues. The OKN field has good drivers. I don't want that to be the takeaway from this. But until we have money on the table, until we have a system and a package that has more people running it, you can't really brand it as a pro class. It's just not like I will say, like, objectively, the 2 OKN packages this weekend put on the worst racing. I don't think as much
100%.
as much as I think the package is a cool idea, and I think that there's value in bringing it into a club series or whatnot, this concept of stars being the only series to run it is not really sustainable, especially if they don't have money on the table. And I think that we saw that reflected in racing, because every other race had at least one really good battle all the way to the finish. And the OKM battle between Ramos and Pauly as well as Terlecki was good, but that was pretty much the only battle that was happening on track for a solid 10 to 15 laps. And until we get the field up, until we kind of get the stakes up a little higher, I think that the OKN field's going to continue to struggle.
Yeah, and I also think it was hard to pass around MCC, but again, the racing.
I don't agree with that. I think that track races pretty well. I think like Emory said, it's the package.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I saw this week was they were on the limiter like pretty soon.
Yes.
And I think even then, whenever you look back at it, we had pretty good racing last year with Wheeler, Carr, Stanfield, and a couple of other guys who were in it. They obviously Carr isn't running the rest of the year because ultimately he lost interest in kind of the package, lost interest in whatever. Not sure of the full details, but from my understanding, it was, he was out of the championship and was kind of lost interest in continuing to run the package. Right. So that was one of the big things that I saw differently this time around, but they were on the limiter relatively quickly. I think the junior, one of the races, I believe we had, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think we had 2 passes, maybe the entire race in one of the heat races.
I also think one of the races we had maybe 2 or 3 finishers in the race.
Yeah, the main event. Yeah, the main event had 2 or 3. I think it was Weiland going for a move. Engine seizes mid corner. Chase Gascioli seizes there as well. Both of them just kind of no idea what happened. Both of them just seized mid corner, and only.
I will say it wasn't an engine seize as far as I'm concerned. I think they both locked up.
Exactly.
Then,
so
then the motor shuts off. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I meant. Besides the seizing,
Yeah.
You're exactly right. They went into the corner, both of them lock up, engines completely shut off, and they're done for the main event. And
I
with
think
racing
part of that is, like we mentioned, with the passing being difficult in the OKNJ and the OKN class, your ambition becomes higher, and so when you see a slight, opportunity, you go for it, and that's where you see, the issues. You see Gasly Elite kind of confirm, Max stalled it, locked it up, motor shuts off, and then that's it. You can't control it. So you're spot on. I think Emory's spot on. It's a tough balance, but when you have a weekend like this as well where the racing isn't great, and I think it wasn't an MCC thing because MCC puts on a great show. It's the MCC combined with the OKN package that's an issue.
That's what I meant to say.
It's kind of like when we go to Newcastle. It's just not a very good show because we're on the limiter way too long. When your best passing opportunity is taken away because you're on the chip too long, it's not a good combination.
Yeah, I really think Charlotte provided some good racing.
Yes, 100%.
Charlotte was good, but that's also different because the track
it sat in the mid range a lot.
Yeah,
Trackhouse will be good as well. I mean, we saw last year with Brent versus Carr was a good race. So there's tracks that have a lot of mid range fit in well with the OKN.
Yes,
but even then, still, I think Cincinnati has good-ish potential for racing with the package, and the field spread for me really kind of made it to where even if there was good racing going on, it made it almost impossible to really see that happen just because there was only 2 or 3 people in each part of the field. And you don't need a lot of karts for a good race, but when the spread is that large and there's really not that many karts in a close vicinity, it makes it tough to really enjoy the racing to its fullest.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that was one side of our pro show, right? We had I would say a complete different story on the other side with our shifters, a really, really strong shifter field. You saw the likes of Charlie Steins get up there, starting inside of the top 3 for the main event. But boys, we talked about OKN a little bit and how we can grow that midfield, but do you guys think that was one of the strongest shifter fields that we've seen in quite some time? We're obviously missing a couple of key roles. I'm not gonna say shifter fields for last weekend. I'm gonna kind of open it up a little bit. Is this the strongest that shifter has been? This year it's kind of been consistently, and I'm gonna use some, I guess, young guy slang. We've had bangers all year long in shifter, right? We had a banger of a race in Orlando. All the way to the stripe with Formal and Mateus. We had a banger of a race at MCC a couple of weeks ago. We had a banger of a race in Charlotte. We had a banger of a race I say that, but Newcastle was also pretty good throughout the motos in the rain and whatnot. And then this weekend was really good. A lot of battling for the lead and kind of falling into other people's hands. And it's been good. So what have we thought about the shifter field? Is this the strongest that shifter has been in, I would say, the last decade?
Yeah, I think this stems back from Rock Vegas. I mean, if you look at the Rock Vegas field, it's pretty strong, and the race was top 5 race of the year, top 3 race of the year. Supernats was incredible, and then we go into Homestead, and there were some runaways here and there, but I think the Isambard Formal fight was great, and then we had rounds 3 and 4 where Mateus kind of burst onto the scene and really stretched his legs on the KZ field. Since then, we have incredible races, like you said. But if you look at the field throughout, I think Scusa owns the shifter side of things in terms of the overall strength of field. Stars does a good job. Obviously, we don't have it at PKS, but Stars has a pretty strong, upper end of the field. Emory and I talked about this a couple of days ago about how Stars and Scusa are pretty similar in terms of top 3, top 5 level. But if you look at that Scusa field, I mean, really down to 10th, it's pretty strong.
I feel like at Stars, you're only really missing 3 guys from that entire shifter field. You're only missing, if I'm not mistaken here, Formal,
the GFC boys.
Oh yeah. All right. So 4 or 5. But anyways, proceed. Sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, you're good. You're good. We're missing. Yeah, we're missing Formal. We're not. I don't know if we're gonna have Kremers back or not. But Kremers was at Orlando. We have the GFC boys in the mix as well. So, and there's a few more guys. I mean, throughout the field, right? Some of the Ital kart guys were there. But nonetheless, I think if you look at that entire pool, there's about 10 guys, I'd say. I could name them, but it would be a long list. That that could win the race. I think at Stars was about 4 or 5 that you could argue in that MCC race that had a chance. I actually think Gavin Bailiff could have won the race if he would have started further up the field with the pace that he had, especially with Jay Irwin getting out of the race.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Jay Irwin probably later on in the show because I think absolute phenom.
Yeah.
But yeah, that the pool of drivers is incredible, and I think we need more Jay Irwins as well. Drivers like him that are 15, about to turn 16. For Newcastle at Pro Tour, where all of a sudden you have junior kids that, oh, where do I go next? Do I go K senior, X30 senior, OKN, or do I go shifter? More Jarowins would be awesome for the shifter class, and I think we're heading that way because it is possible. We saw it with Brent Cruz and Zilich a couple years ago. It's doable if you're a young star looking to make that next step up. Then you look at that Formal, obviously, Morgado, Irwin, Kremers sometimes here in the States. All 3 of the GFC boys, Pickett, you have Wick, and then you have Gulick. And I know I'm missing a few, but Emory, you're much more a history guy than I am, and I think I'm decent, but you're much better. I think last decade, I'd say this matches up with any shifter field.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really have to go back to when Pro Tour was primarily shifter based and didn't have the K, didn't have the air cooled stuff, as to when I would say was the last time you could really rival the shifter field. Because I mean, short of the S1, S2 days where you had kind of that kind of depth, even then the depth was very much more hit or miss. Like you'd have some races where the field would be a lot stronger than at other races throughout the year. You'd kind of have a break in the action. Well, and really SCUSA was the only mainstream series at the time to tap into that on the Pro Tour side of things. So for me, this is absolutely the best shifter field we've had since probably 2015 or 2016, even at its peak. And I'd argue from a consistency standpoint, taking it all the way back to the early part of the 2010s is the best that we've seen. As far as Stars versus SCUSA goes, exactly what you said, Alex. I mean, I think that the front of the field, you have a bit more guys in the mix in SCUSA. And in general, the depth of Pro Tour is a little bit stronger in the sense that I take, for example, AJ Meyer starting 24th in the heats or in the 2 motos this weekend. If that had happened in Pro Tour, I don't think he gets to the top 5 in either of the 2 heats because there's a solid. The guys where you really see the difference is the 10th to 17th place guys in Stars are significantly, or not significantly, but like a little bit more off the pace compared to the main guys as compared to what they would be in Pro Tour. And in Pro Tour, instead of having 4 to 5 guys like Alex mentioned that could win the race, you have probably 10 that could stand on the box if everything goes right. So I think the depth is a little bit stronger in SCUSA, but ultimately both series, like this is a field that if you would have dropped into a Pro Tour about 3 years ago, you would say that's a strong shifter field. And up until I would say about early part of last year, the shifter fields in the U.S. were not anywhere near as strong as what they are now. Even on the star side of things, like a guy like Talon Yakel mentioned it on the podcast last week, where he won the series last year. This year, it's a fight. It's a complete fight to be inside the top 3 consistently. Annie Rule was very competitive in the first couple of years, and she looks a little bit more. It's kind of more of a struggle for her to be up at the front of the field just because of how much depth there is in the shifter field. So
I think this goes back to something that we talked about earlier, prize money. If you look at the difference between, and the Stars has a pretty strong field this year, but you look at the difference between the Stars and the SCUSA fields, you have to almost point fingers at the prize pool you have at SCUSA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that and the one other thing I will say is SCUSA has kind of a built-in brand advantage where basically ever since they started with Supernats in the late 90s, it's been a shifter focused series. All the way back to, I mean, they used to have I think it was 5 separate shifter classes that they would run over the course of the weekend. And that was 60% of their card. So like for the guys that are on the West Coast, the GFC boys, some of the other teams that kind of comprise the midfield, and then also the guys coming in from overseas, SCUSA is a series with a brand advantage, and that's one of the things I think that Stars has worked its way forward in recent years. They've done a nice job on the branding side. I think it's one of the biggest strengths that the Stars Championship Series has, but ultimately you're still kind of fighting a little bit of that prestige disadvantage on the SCUSA side of things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can't agree more with all that. The one of the things that I really like about Stars is And this was something that I really saw this weekend is whenever you walk the paddock, I like seeing kind of those solo operations go out there and you know, race either a dad and son operation. I spoke this weekend to the Thomases, Jeremiah Thomas's, Jeremiah Thomas and his dad out there this weekend, to the Carapalati brothers who are out there racing kind of a solo operation as well. So I really think that's pretty cool to see from the Stars Championship Series. And then you move over to back to kind of like the shifter side of things. One of the things that I kind of really think has made a little bit of a difference this year is we don't have as many races, right? Last year we had, on the shifter side, last year we had 3 series, one of them having 5 races in the year with 5 shifter races in the year. One of them had 4 with Stars, and another had, it was 6 races. SCUSA was last year, 3 weekends for SCUSA. So I think it's also one of the big things of why we're starting to see a little bit, you know, of consistency in the shifter class, because every weekend in Stars has been 25 plus. In SCUSA, it's been like 30, knocking on the door of 30. So it's been, you know, super consistent to say the least. But I think, and unfortunately, it's has to do with the fact that USBKS doesn't have a shifter class this year, you know, because it seemed like last year some of those guys were racing a lot. And whenever you look at it, what are they going to choose, right? Last year, AJ Myers wasn't running Stars. He was running USBKS and SCUSA. Why is that? Because both of those series offer money if you win a race. This year, USBKS is in here, but you know, you still need to kind of get hours and put stuff in every single weekend. So that was why I think we've been as consistent as we have.
Yeah, I will say, to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate on the USPKS point, though, it's not like they didn't dangle the carrot in front of all of the shifter drivers before the season. Like,
Yeah.
I was religiously looking at the entry list for Texas before they ultimately axed it, and as of we lost our good friend Alex for a second here.
I think he's sneezing or something.
I think he's got to work out some internal demons right now. Anyways, we'll see Alex throw in a second. But in the meantime, you know, I was talking to AJ about this down in Texas, and he was like, yeah, like no one wanted to come play with me. It was him and Talon were the only 2 that registered for shifter, and that was a week before the season started. There was 57 NKA at the point where they axed shifter. So they gave them opportunity to run shifter. I think I've heard some mixed things from teams as to why they didn't want to run USBKS. I think the schedule had a part to do with that, and just ultimately, when you're running that series, and also too, a lot of the guys that run at the front of the shifter field, like a Morgado, like a Formal, like a Romero City, have other obligations to do, and so I guess the temptation, sort of the motivation to run a shifter race or shifter series in USPKS when you're not going to get any drops, and it's a 5 race calendar, 5 different tracks, and 5 weekends that, from what I understood, were kind of conflict of schedule for a couple of guys. That I think played a part in it, as did as well in general USPKS, kind of the opposite of SCUSA, never really fit their target demographic. Shifter did, and we saw good numbers from them in Orlando, decent numbers in Newcastle. But 3 of the 5 races last year, Texas, Cincinnati, and then really Trackhouse, all 3 of them had weak numbers for USPKS. So I don't think it's as much Stars taken away from USPKS.
Easy where you go with the word Texas, pal.
Hey, Texas
kidding.
Hey,
but
Texas.
Yes, we only had like 10 or 11, I think.
Hey, Trackhouse only had 9. Like we were struggling too, man. We were all in the gutter.
Yeah.
I think it was more about the series than the. But the big thing is, in general, more people are kind of motivated to run shifter than in years past. I think there's more teams kind of stepping up to the plate, willing to throw a competitive shifter package. I look at PSL before they brought Krimmers to the plate in 2022. I don't recall them having anywhere near as many customer drivers racing consistently. So their shifter package now with Krimmers, previously Morgado, now having more customers. You have RPG kind of dabbling into there, where prior to 2023, they really didn't touch the single speed stuff, or late 2022 when Formal got signed on.
Ryan
Sure.
also ran a shifter earlier this year on the rock side of things, I believe. So
Yeah,
that's
but that's just Ryan.
yeah.
That's just Ryan trying
But
different stuff.
but
Like,
but like even then, like I think if you look back like to a couple years ago, he wouldn't even. I was actually watching back like a really old episode of Happy Hour on my long drive home, which was 16 hours. So I was kind of getting bored and looking at stuff to watch. And
what
one of the
time did we
episodes,
make it back, by the way?
yes, I got back yesterday at around noon, I think, Texas time. So
Did you
that-
stop? Did you stop at all?
yeah, I stopped at a Love's and I was like, dude, I'm kind of tired. So I just kind of leaned back and fell asleep. And then when I woke up, like the sun was coming out and I was like, dang it, I overslept. And not really. I slept, it was like 5 hours, but
Not like the
got
previous
back
day.
around. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, what? Yeah, I guess so.
No, but
Yeah, that's right. I slept like 11 hours.
yeah,
the day before I
but
left.
no OSHA violations were committed in the process.
No.
We took a work break. We made sure we didn't get right back on the road. So
No, for sure.
glad you make it back.
But yeah, it was a long drive. But I was saying before Emory just distracted me there. I really think if the shifter field wasn't as consistent and as strong as it was kind of this year, I don't think he would have drivers like that kind of looking to even dabble in there, like Ryan did at the start of the year. But we can go on and on about this topic, but it's definitely been a big growth for that shifter class, nonetheless, this year across Stars and SCUSA. Can you boys agree?
100%.
Yeah, so it's definitely stuff that you love to see, but we still have a lot coming your way, and we're going to talk about driver standings, standings across the championship series, racecraft, and a lot of other things. That was the first half of our show. Again, we're gonna it's a double podcast. Susanna will be on later on today after we're done yapping about what we want to yap. But first, we'll have a word from our partners, and like we were saying this weekend, hey Brandon, and we'll send it over to those guys on the commercial.
Brandon, why are there all these charges for just over $200 from Acceleration Kart Racing's website?
That's because AKR gives you free shipping on orders of $200 or more within the continental US.
Okay, but I thought you were just getting a pair of gloves. That's what, $70?
But if I'm getting a new pair of gloves, I might as well get a new pair of shoes to match. And then on top of that, I'll get a neck brace because with the shipping, it's basically free.
Yeah, I do not think the math checks out on that.
Everything you need, all in one place and shipped to your door for free for orders of $200 or more. Exclusions apply. Spend responsibly. Shop AKR.com.
Brandon, why?
I guess it's not hey Brandon.
Yeah,
we all kept saying hey Brandon all weekend to Brandon, and it's just Brandon.
Yeah, I guess. Wow, and we watched that commercial like a gazillion times in a week.
I apologize to anybody in the Kings Island line at the Beast at 11 o'clock at night when we were all tired and we were just saying Brandon to Brandon about 100 times.
Hey Brandon. Oh wait, okay, there you go, Emory. Sorry. But yeah,
Brandon.
Hey Brandon.
that's kind of funny. Yeah, he now officially hates that commercial, but we have a lot more coming your way. I'm sure we're gonna come up with a new batch here shortly.
We need
And
Rocco in one of these.
yeah, no, for sure. We have a very I guess diverse all-star crew that kind of starts working a lot and all work hard. And yeah, while we're actually on this topic, a shout out to our crew, our camera guys, Alex, who got violently sunburnt on Sunday afternoon. But round of applause to our entire crew for really working their butts off all weekend long to bring everybody all the best shots, all the best action, and everything in between to really kind of deliver what it takes to put on a stream. And it's really a lot of hard work, and especially for those camera guys, they're by far outworking a lot of guys that are out there, myself included. I sit down and talk about racing all day, but those guys have to sit out there in the sun and kind of deal with either wasps or bees that fly around. I believe one of our actual lifts got hit by a golf ball this weekend because there was a golf course right next to it. That was actually Jerry Fandry, who was kind of pelted by the terrible golf swing of somebody who was over there at the golf course. It could have been. It sounds like I was over there golfing at some point.
Yeah.
I have a terrible slice, so
Whoever has a dark blue golf ball that hit Jerry in the middle of, I think it was the K Junior final.
yeah,
Whoever did that, I hope
yeah.
you never pick up a
A golf club
a
again.
golf ball
What's
again.
so crazy is that actually took a lot of skill to do that. Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
the golf course is close to the track, but it's not that close. Like that's a
it's
that's a
across
slice and a
the
half.
woods.
Yeah.
And that could have been that bro. That was 15 feet from the racetrack.
It was definitely close. It was, yeah, it takes a lot of skill to really do something like that. But
Elite.
we'll go back into our racing, I guess, topics here. Boys, we have kind of talked a lot about a lot of stuff. We're at the middle of the season now. I think we've been in the middle of the season for quite some time. Talk about the midseason burnout and whatnot, but mid-season report cards, I guess we should say, and we'll give it one for each class. What do we think about the driver standing, the driver driving standards so far over the past month and so far up to the season? Emory, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so driver report cards, right? I think the easiest way to structure this, and first off, like I think we're kind of doing this a bit on the fly. Let's start with shifter. Mateus Morgado, A+.
Mhm.
I think Morgado's been dominant. Jay Irwin gets an A as well. The PSL boys have been very strong to start the season. I think the idea is this has kind of been a long enough that we're far enough into the season so far that we've been able to see kind of how different drivers are representative on a pace standpoint. We've seen Billy and Josh Conker run up front for the JMF guys. They get a passing grade. I'd say on the flip side of things, a little bit disappointing for AJ. Even though he's at the front of the Stars Championship, he has a shot in Scusa. They've kind of missed the mark in main events at times, the Magic Boys, and especially we've seen it now twice in Charlotte as well as in Cincinnati, and then also for Pro Tour at Cincinnati, they lost out to Morgado in the final as well. So that's kind of three of the five, and Orlando, they kind of struggled for pace altogether. So 4 of the 5 big races this year, they've struggled for sheer pace on the shifter side. On the K side, they've been fast. K is a bit of a roulette table. We already know this. But in general, I think that AJ, to only have kind of one marquee victory so far at this point in the season, a little bit disappointing. But for Jay Irwin to kind of burst on the scene like he has, he gets an A for me. And obviously, Morgado has been basically unbeatable ever since the first weekend in Homestead and the shifter side of things.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at my computer here. For me, I'm with Emory on the PSL guys. They seem to have at least feature races figured out. I think it takes them a bit to get the pace. I think Mateus has it figured out pretty well. So yeah, A+ for Mateus. I think the team as a whole has been incredible. Diego's been fast. Henry has got an OKN win at Cincinnati. Jerry Irwin, whenever I'm at the racetrack, is really fast. The 2 weekends that I've not been there, he's DNF'd. So, but the 2 weekends that I've been there, well, he DNF'd this weekend, but we're not going to count that. He was going to win that race by like 2.5, 3 seconds. So yeah, that kid, incredible driver, and I think he has the feature races figured out. The heat races, he's been pretty good, but whatever they do in the feature races to have that pace sustain. I mean, what he did at Charlotte on raw pace to AJ by 10 seconds was incredible. And then here in Cincy, he was going to put 3 or more seconds on Billy before the brakes went. So yeah, Jay's been really, really quick. I think you look down the order, you look at Sodi, they've been strong, right? I mean, Talon, when he was on Sodi, was, I'd say, if we're giving grades here, probably B for Talon, because once he got it figured out, he was pretty solid at Newcastle. They're going to welcome in Danny. So if we're talking Danny, we'll rank him in the Sodi side of things, I guess. He's been an A+. I mean, if you look at the races that he's actually driven in, he has been incredibly quick. Mateus obviously has so far the field covered this year, but Danny's been one of the closest all year long. You got to give Billy an A, because with Billy on weekends where things aren't falling off or things just aren't going his way, it's not ideal. But when weekends are actually being put together by Billy and the Race Factory boys and all that, it's fast. I mean, this weekend he proved it. And even the Scusa weekend, he had very similar pace before the brakes decided to not work, and he was driving the heat races in the final with basically just rear brakes, which is not fun if you've ever driven a shifter. So for Billy, when things are actually put together, I think Billy's been very, very fast. The GFC guy's been good too. I think a little bit left to be desired, I'd say, so far on the season, but they've been consistent. I think if you look at Gavin for the Trinity boys, impressive. I think Gavin's about a year or two away from being a certified top 3, top 5 consistent shifter driver on any field you put him in, even in Scusa. So for Bailiff, I think I got to give him a B+. From where he's started a couple years ago to now, Gavin has been one of the most impressive. I think to me the standout shifter driver of the year is Ian Quinn. To see where he came from and to see the progression and the rapid growth that he's had. I know PSL has that shifter chassis seemingly figured out right now, but for Ian Quinn to do what he's doing right now on limited testing, on limited time, now he's getting more and more as PSL puts more trust into him, but he has been quick. I think if some luck can go his way, it would be he'd be a much happier camper. But when he puts weekends together like he did at Charlotte and even Newcastle, I'd say, and that final at Cincinnati, that final was awesome because he had no luck in the motos. But that final was awesome for Ian Quinn. Granted, he got a penalty, but
For passing under yellow, yeah.
It happened to AJ too. It happens to the best of them. So yeah, Ian's been awesome. And I don't want to take away everybody. We're just talking about shifter right now, but that's kind of where I stand. I agree with Emory's rankings as well.
Yeah, for the first half of I guess that it seemed like it was like you get an A, you get an A, you get an A, and it was like you get a B+, and I'm like, all right, this guy may.
Just Oprah.
That's literally, I was like, dude, if Alex was my college professor, I would have a master's degree by now with all the A's that I'd be getting. But anyways, okay, I felt a sneeze coming there for a second, so now I see why Alex was wanting to pop out. But anyway, I, on the other hand, kind of agree with most of the stuff you guys were saying on the driver report cards. I will give obviously an A+ to Mateus Morgado. Has won a lot this year. Actually, I'll give him an A, right at an A. His heat races haven't been the best all year long. He's had to do a lot of the work in the main events.
I think he has 9 straight feature wins in a shifter.
That's cool, but again, his lack of performance in the heat races has really put him on the back foot in the championship at Scusa.
If you ever wanted to know who does the Aramco F1 power rankings,
it's this guy.
This is the answer.
I'll give him an A. I'll give him an A, and he's.
There better not be an A+ on that list then.
I really don't think anybody has an A+ on my list. Because if anybody had an A+ on my list, they'd be kind of sweeping the heat races, winning every single main event that they went to and whatnot.
I think that kind of goes against. Real quick before I let you continue, that kind of goes against. We were talking about how this shifter pool is one of the strongest we've seen. If somebody was just sweeping the shifter heats and the final, it wouldn't be as fun. But I think because the shifter field is so strong, the fact that he's won 9 straight, it's got to be an A+.
Nice A in my book. I think AJ's only 60 points off of him. So I'll give AJ in Scusa. AJ had a really good win at Newcastle. Obviously, we're about to go to Newcastle again. I'll give AJ honestly a A-. I'll give him an A-. I'll rank for Mal an A- as well. And then we go down the order. I'll give Bailiff a B+. I think that one was pretty good. Ian Quinn, I'll give him an A- as well. I'll rank him in that same group because he's done a good job this year. I'll give him an A-. You go back to Billy Musgrave. I'll give Billy, and I must say some of the issues that he's had haven't been his fault. and most of them haven't been his fault with either mechanicals. But again, like I'll rank him in the B range because of, I guess, solely just the mechanicals, unfortunately. So I'll rank him in the B range. I'll give Irwin a B plus as well. Or actually, I'm gonna have a lot of A minuses on my list.
You sound like me, bro.
Just a heads up. A minus. It's kind of hard to be perfect in my eyes. All right. There are a lot of guys. Anyways, but yeah, I would say like class ranking overall for that shifter class will be like a B plus in my eyes. B plus for most of those guys. I could go down the list and further down the order, but
Who's your standout driver
my standout driver of the year
in shifter so far? In shifter,
like this is kind of hard. I'll go with Jay Irwin. Jay Irwin's my standout of the year.
I think PSL is a monopoly on the two standouts.
No, for
like
sure.
If we don't count Mateus, because I think there was much higher expectations for Mateus than there would be for Jay.
Like you like, in all honesty, you expect that from a world champion. If you're not winning like every single race, and if you're not like performing at the level that Mateus is, like even when he loses a heat race, to me it seems like something's going wrong. You know, whenever like that guy isn't like qualifying on pole, or when he qualifies even fifth, like you expect more. You know what I mean?
I think expectations would be higher for him when you're comparing to his teammates like Jay, like Ian. But even, like, again, that field is so strong that it's not like Mateus has ever really stepped onto a racetrack weekend and qualified 8th, 4/10 off, right? Like his bad qualifying is a third, or his idea of a bad heat is fell off in the heat race and finished second. You know what I mean? Like I think his performances in the finals have been incredible. I think his standout performance was actually that qualifying in Homestead, putting 3/10 on Formal. But if you look at his teammates, like Jay, there were not a lot of expectations coming into this year. He kind of burst onto the scene at Orlando, and then since then he's been on a pretty good hot streak when he actually finishes the race. So that's why I think you're accurate with Jay Irwin. I think Ian Quinn's the other one for me, like I mentioned earlier. I think PSL kind of owns the standouts. I think Gavin could earn a spot on the standout list as well.
No, for sure.
With how impressive he's been lately. But yeah, Emory, we didn't get your standout guy. Do you have a standout?
Look, I'll just say Mateus Morgado.
There
I know
it is.
I know it sounds
Next.
okay. I know it sounds boring, but like when you consider how difficult it is to basically, he's doing to the shifter field what Ryan Norberg did to the X30 field 2 years ago. And I know Caleb's like, when he loses a heat race, man, can't do that.
It's the end of the world in my eyes.
He qualified 6th in Cincinnati, but he was a 10th and a half off the pace. Like
failure. No, I'm playing.
Like to have run, I think it was 4 main races in Europe the year before in a shifter, and then jump in the next year in the US on a list of tracks he's never driven in a shifter and immediately be up at the front of the field and winning races constantly. Like, that's impressive. I expected Mateus to be in the fight, to be winning races. I did not expect him to win every single race he's ran since January 15th. Like, think of all the world events that have happened since the start of January, and then realize that all of those have happened since Mateus Morgado lost a race in shifter. That makes him stand out to me.
Okay. That was fair enough. Anyways, we'll move on from the I guess we still have X30 up. Do you guys want to do X30 as well for
yeah.
Like I don't want to go like in depth, or I guess we can.
We'll make it quick. We'll make it quick.
But standouts, I really think will be something good to do for the X30 side of
Terlecki.
Okay, Nicholas Terlecki for Alexander Searle.
I'm glad that you said that, so I don't have to seem like a homer.
He's not going to beat the bias allegations anytime soon.
No, I'm not going to pick Nick. I think there's a few different perspectives. I think Donovan Bonilla, the first half of the year, since his win at Supernats, has been a solid step up from where he was last year. Hayden Jones is now second in points with 1 round to go, with a legitimate shot at winning the championship. If you want kind of a more off the wall sort of brand pick, I would say what Jacob Kolar did at Homestead and how pace wise, how he's been since the start of the year has been super impressive. But no, I think there's a lot of guys on the X30 side of things. The tool for me, it comes down to like how much do I want to be on the. I went with this very, very basic pick of Morgado for standout. So that's the easy side on the shifter. But on the X30 side, going down through the field, there's a lot of guys that I think have that answer. But since Alex took who was going to be my pick in Trolecki, I'll go ahead and I'll throw out Jacob Kolar on that one because
Is there? Oh, continue.
because I think his pace in Homestead was phenomenal. His pace in Cincinnati with Speed Concepts is really good, and there really hasn't been a race this year where on pure pace he's been outside of the top 10. And to me, that's a pretty decent step forward from last year and where I think I expected him to be.
I don't want to pull an Emory here and say like a Mateus style driver, but I think Pauly deserves a lot of credit in terms of it'll take a lot to win the PKS championship, but he is in genuine contention for all 3 125 class championships. I think that deserves a little bit of praise.
So
Wait, I just got kicked, I think.
I think we're good. Oh, Alex is not good. Kaleb was not good. Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Did we all just get booted from our own studio?
That was weird.
Nice. Well,
Do you guys hear my Pauly take?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
I
that all
did.
went through. Okay, good. That was so weird.
I actually opened up YouTube and saw if you guys were still on here, and I look at YouTube and it's just blank. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not the only one having these same issues. But I did hear your Pauly take. Well, anyways, welcome back to KC Grit Talk for episode number 19.
Let's go.
We had untimely, I guess, little gremlin in our technology is so weird, but whatever.
Shout out to StreamYard.
Yeah, hey, shout out StreamYard.
Shout out that this is I think back to back weekends has happened now.
No, for sure. Definitely not what you want to see. And I guess we are kind of oversaturating it a little bit. We do have like a gazillion saved episodes in this. So anyway.
Yeah.
I also have like 1,000 tabs open because I'm one of those guys.
Goodness gracious.
Solid.
But we were talking about standout drivers. Alex, you said Pauly Massimino.
I said Terlecki, and I think Massimino deserves credit because to be in contention for all 3 125 classes and considerably in 2 of them. PKS, it'll take a lot to beat Garrison, but to be very close in OKN and the X30 Championship at SCUSA, I think he deserves some praise.
I'll throw Garrison in there as well.
Yeah.
I think Kolar's kind of my like deep field answer, but Garrison's had a lot of good runs. And if you look at his USPKS numbers, I mean, he's almost 400 points clear of the field in that championship. And I mean, he has not finished a main event outside of the podium on the USPKS side of things. And those have been pretty competitive fields at 3 completely different racetracks. So
yeah,
I think Garrison deserves a mention, but yeah, I think there's a number of guys. Alex took probably the 2 best answers. So shout out to him on that. But Kaleb.
Look, my pick's gonna be out of the box here. Gonna be something that nobody's heard of before. Give me Austin Garrison. No, but seriously, I was kind of joking about the first half of that. Austin Garrison has been my kind of standout of the year. Leading USPKS by a good margin, I believe, is a little bit down when it comes to SCUSA, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he's outside of the leader circle in SCUSA.
Yeah. I remember talking to him at the airport. He's unfortunately out of the leader circle, like you said. But he's been my standout so far this year, and I would say along with Pauly, if I really had to pick like a standout, I kind of did it. If I had 2, it'd be Paulie. Paulie would be my other one because he's been really, really strong across all three, in contention for all three.
Just consistent.
And consistent. I think Xander used to call him back in the a couple years ago. He used to call him the silent assassin. So
That was definitely not Paulie.
that wasn't Paulie. Who was that? No, I really think it was. I was watching Happy Hour. I think Xander gave that nickname to two people.
I think Smock said Hayden was the silent assassin,
and then Xander said the same thing about Paulie, and that's why they don't call anybody the silent assassin anymore.
I think it just got oversaturated, honestly.
I've heard about this, but anyways, those two guys are pretty good. Hayden's also up there for me, but those guys have been impressive. Hayden as well as in the running for a championship this year too, so that's pretty cool to see. But yeah, a lot of guys have really done a good job. If you want to do standout across the big three, the big three, I guess KA, X30, and Shifter, it would definitely be James Overbeck for me. James Overbeck would be my standout driver, I would say, even of the year for me. If you were to ask, up there with Finnegan Bailiff as well, who has, I think, 2 national race wins this year.
Yep, Orlando and Cincy.
Orlando and Cincinnati.
Yeah.
In the running for all 3 championships as well. So,
well, if you want to give, since we're going to add K into this, I will say, if you look across all 3 series, right, pretty much all the contenders have at least one series that they haven't been good in. Isambard won in Charlotte, he won in Texas, he's won 2 of the different series, but then points-wise, he's really kind of fallen off on both of those. But one guy that I think has been really good, and he's only run USPKS, but the way that he's kind of clawed himself into the championship lead is impressive.
Emory Lida. Oh, sorry.
I wish.
Cooper Shipman, though, seriously.
Hey, we're rocking P12 in the championship, but Shipman, he's P1.
Yeah.
And honestly, like for a guy that has not been in a karting scene that much this year to be consistently up at the front of the field, and he also doesn't have teammates really to get data from either. So he's kind of doing this on limited seat time by himself. And I mean, you look at all 3 races, I think he's gotten on the podium every single race.
Yeah, he was on the podium in Houston, he was 4th in Trackhouse. Yeah.
And then I think he finished 3rd officially in Dowsman. Yeah. On track, he was a couple spots back from that.
I think that Dowsman race really proved how good of a driver he is, because he had a few things go awry during that weekend, and he just stayed methodical, especially in that feature race, even when things were not going his way and the KA race got as hectic as it did.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you can claw your way back up to a podium after everything that happened proves why he's a championship contender, proved why he's the points leader. So I think, like you said, Emory, running just the PKS series, but he's doing exactly what you have to do to be a champion.
Yeah. For sure.
And objectively, like none of the 3 weekends he's had, I think, the outright best pace, but he's come away from all of them in the top 3 or 4 in points every time. And like down the list of guys, no one else can say that. Like Finn had a really good weekend in Dowsman. Overbeck had a good weekend in Mooresville. Isambard had a good weekend in Texas, obviously. We saw Mick Gabriel win his one-off race in Dowsman as well. But like you get on the list, AJ struggled a bit in the main events, pretty much all 3 of them outside of Dowsman. Like for Shipman, he's consistently put it together. So I think ultimately, if you had to ask for an overall like standout driver across all 3 or across anything, I'd say James Overbeck. If we wanted to go even further than that, Zane Burgess has been phenomenal on the micro side of things. But yeah, I think Overbeck, Cooper Shipman, all of the guys. Parker. No, Parker's had a great season as well. Honestly, like the micro to mini jump gets underestimated by a lot of people, but for Parker to go in and instantly win 3 national races at this point is super impressive. Like that's the thing. Him, Vid Montian's had a good year on the KA side of things. I think the thing with Enzo too, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but the thing with Enzo that's impressed me is compared to last year, the ability to kind of stay out of trouble, so to speak, to kind of put his head forward. If you look at the end of the race weekends, just about every main event, he's found a way to be up at the front, not take himself out of contention, not have other people take him out of contention. And it's how he wins these races with big gaps, is he's not faster than them by that margin. It's that he finds a way to kind of create the gap. He creates the chaos, and he is smart enough to kind of keep himself, know when to attack, know when to be level-headed. So there's a lot of guys. I think every single category has at least one that I would say has been a real standout to this point.
Yeah, no, for sure. And whenever you talk about that, I kind of shift in focus here to a little bit of the kind of driving standards aspect of things, and that was one of the big things that we kind of talked about at the end of the weekend here with, and I'm kind of gonna go into it pretty harshly here because the KA Junior, it was a pre-final, I think, was really and I'm just going to go out there and really say it. That was some of the worst racing I think we've seen all year long.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
100%.
really unfortunately, and it kind of hurts me to kind of go out there and say it and kind of want to bite my tongue, but it's something that we really have to talk about here. It really was by far some of the best racing, some of the worst racing all year long, and that was, you know, whenever you look at that class, really, really good drivers all throughout, but the final was a complete different story. They drove very mature. We had, I believe, 35 drivers finish that race. So it was a really, really big change. And I know they definitely got a talking to at the end of Saturday. And it was much better to see that many drivers finish the main event Sunday afternoon. But whenever you see how that race really played out on the Saturday, it was just not what you want to see. You know, there was moments during that race where you kind of want to close your eyes because you're scared of what's going to happen next. And that was really, really scary. There were some really, really scary incidents that went on, but it's stuff that we kind of have to talk about in the position that we're in now, boys. We really have to talk about kind of the driving standards over the past month, because last time we were at the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati, the Saturday was really, really clean. We had good racing for SCUSA. Then you get to the Sunday, and I mean, we're wrecking left and right, wrecking at the race start and doing whatnot. You know, we've shown that we can race around this racetrack, and then we kind of go into the Sunday, and everything that we did on the Saturday and all the clean driving that we had on the Saturday completely changed on the Sunday afternoon. Whenever we got into Sunday racing action for SCUSA. This weekend was a lot cleaner on the senior side of things. Junior was, was junior on Saturday, unfortunately. But yeah, Emory, I know you, all of us really talked about it on the drive home after the Saturday, and we were kind of all really disappointed about it. So I'll let you have the floor here.
Yeah, so I want to clarify something first on the KA Junior side of things. To me, the pre-final was obviously very rough. I will say I think it gets a little bit worse of a look because the Dupuis incident that happened, which was very scary, which thankfully everyone was able to walk away from. To me, that had nothing to do with driver standards. That was just
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Nate dropped a wheel, spun around. It's a fast section of the track, kind of a freak accident where he got spun, but not enough momentum to go all the way across the track, and he kind of got very lucky that he was in the center and it didn't work out worse than it did. But yeah, this is something I've really been thinking about since the first Cincinnati race, and it's that, like, when you look across the board at the semi-pro categories, the racecraft is as bad, if not worse, than it's ever been in my 11 years of kart racing. And it starts, to me, at the front of the field. I think the blocking that we're seeing, granted, white lining is part of the sport. It's a genuine tactical move. I understand the need to go white lining, but there comes a point where we're getting closer and closer and closer to the line of what acceptable blocking is. And I'll just be completely blunt. I don't think any of the three series are doing a completely adequate job of getting that line right. Like, we have USPKS that's very aggressive on swerving penalties, and they've done a great job, I think, of ironing out a lot of that. And SCUSA's kind of taken the lead, Stars as well. All three of the series have taken out swerving, but late moves aren't necessarily swerves. Like, I saw the Heat 1 of KA Senior, and this is not at all to harp on Mick Gabriel. I think Mick has shown time and again that he can be a very clean driver, and we've seen him race cleanly. But there were straight up 4 or 5 instances in that race where he was late to throw a block, drove the cart behind him down to the grass, and if the driver that had legal position to make a move did the same move to him and faded back at all, made any sort of wheel movement, or simply held their wheel straight, there'd be an airplane crash going into the sweeper there, right? No penalty for that. Only a penalty for the jump start, which again dropped him down to 9th, but not for the blocking. You look even in micro, like I love seeing what a lot of the guys that we're watching at the front of the micro field do. But if you watch the lines that they take from turn 1 to turn 2 at Cincinnati, they go defensive into turn 1, go wide out of 1, and then immediately dart down to the bottom without paying any attention to the carts behind them. That drastic of a movement and completely obliterating a crossover line, like if it's not properly enforced, I saw at least 2 or 3 times where someone had a slight nose to the inside and basically almost got their front nose chopped off in the cadet categories. We saw it a lot in micro. We saw it in mini as well. And unfortunately for Josh Bergman, again, Josh is an outstanding driver. And this is not a Josh Bergman problem. This is a series problem of a series and honestly a driver coach problem as well of like we're letting people get away with too much to where when they get to the line, it's way beyond what the line should be. Like Bergman's penalty in the final, I thought it wasn't just him. That entire group of 3 all of them had at least one incident where they were blocking where I felt like it was on the line of what should have been a penalty. Bergman happened to have the most excessive of the 2. I thought he had 2 moves that honestly could have drawn a penalty. And again, it's not a Josh thing. Josh is really no more aggressive with it than anyone else in the class. It's just the way that it played out. But the point is, when we're allowing such reactive driving and such kind of aggressive defense, naturally there's going to be more incidents. I think the K senior final that I raced in Wisconsin was some of the worst racecraft I've ever been a part of. And I use it to my advantage. Full disclosure, like I had a strategy. I told Alan this in the scale line. I was like, if it's something that I think is someone that I think is going to be aggressive and that I think is going to cause chaos behind me, I put them in a bad situation and let them clear out the rest of the pack for me. If I think it's someone that's slower that's just going to naturally defend, I'll let it be, right? If that's the case, if I can trust that someone being over aggressive blocking is going to lead to 3 or 4 carts in the pack getting stacked up, and I can trust that the lead pack that I was 7 seconds back from is going to race and white line each other and crash each other enough that I have a shot at the top 5 in that race, that's an issue. And I think you see it in the attrition. You see in the K junior pre-final that there were 19 carts that finished out of 30. In the K senior final in Dowsman, 12 carts DNF'd. Like, the field attrition numbers are bad. Carts are getting torn up. We've seen more red flags in the last month than we saw at the start of this season. And I honestly think we've seen the white lining has been a very effective strategy. We saw Keeble win a race, basically white lining the whole time last year. It's always been a play in shifter. It's been a play in KA, but that's not what the issue is not white lining. It's people being late to block, stepping it too far in the series, letting it go until it's an obvious swerve, at which point there's been 5 or 6 incidents that have created chaos that should have been penalized in the first place.
Yeah. And I agree with the majority of that. I still think, and it's completely legal, white lining throughout a race. Some people may not like it. Me personally, I am not a fan of white lining. I should say I think it's kind of nice that the field gets stacked up. If you were to ask me if I want to see a race get played out because of white lining and not just pure racing side-by-side action, then I would definitely take the side-by-side action all day long. But white lining is going to be a thing. A driver that I'm kind of really good friends with and I talk to often because he races out here in Texas very often is Jesus Vasquez Jr., who was out there racing in Dowsman, and he was one of the drivers who was white lining, and he kind of I actually it's funny enough because after one of the races that we had at the Texas Spin Racing Series earlier this year, I went up to him and I was like, dude, like, white lining this and that. And he was like, yeah. And I kind of told him, I made it very like clear to him, like how I felt about it. And it wasn't because he was doing it. It was because whatever was playing out on the racetrack. And now, he was obviously using that to his kind of advantage or using that at Dousman. And it ended up not working for him. Right. Because whenever you kind of go into the white line situation, you kind of put it more into the hands of other drivers. And then you're going to know, like, about this because you've been in the seat a lot lately, especially in this K100 senior class. But whenever you kind of see someone white lining throughout a race, the natural instinct and I guess the natural annoyingness and anger of a driver comes out where you want to kind of move somebody. If somebody's in front of you, and I think Xander talked about this as well, the kind of bump and running and stuff like that. Whenever someone white lines throughout a race or whatnot, you're kind of calling for contact being made, right? To me, whenever you white line in a race, it's kind of like telling someone like to bump and run you out of the way. Because I'm a racing driver as well, and I'm gonna be completely honest here. If I was in a situation like that, I would completely move somebody if they were white lining. But that's just because we're all race car drivers. We're all racers. And as racers, we're aggressive sometimes. You want to make moves and whatnot. If I see somebody white lining for a lead when there's a pack of 8 guys right behind me, I'm going to completely move somebody who's in front of me. And that's the unfortunate part of it, right? You're muted, Emory, I think, if you want to add something.
Well,
Yeah, sorry.
I think you highlighted a bunch of issues. I think you also added more issues to the issues.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I'm completely the issue, right? Like drivers like
well, no. So my point is, there's a couple of things.
Yeah, go
Your
ahead.
point, you're exactly right. I think you see it all the time. People white line. What do you want to do? You get frustrated. You want to move them.
For sure.
You can't.
It's definitely not the solution. For
or
sure.
then you get a pushback.
It's definitely not the solution.
It creates that's a rabbit hole to go down on more things that we can work on, the pushbacks or what's acceptable with the bump and run without it being too much, right? Like if you wreck somebody, it's a penalty. But if you move them up the racetrack, you see it in shifter all the time, right? Because it's harder to pass. So you'll see guys, bump somebody out the way and go down the inside, not a penalty, and that's usually fair game of shifter, but they know that if you do it to them, they're going to do it back to you. And that's fair. To me, in the pro level of racing especially, that's should be more acceptable. I think the issue, you mentioned white line, both of you, and more than ever have I seen white lining this year. And it's because it's being used rather than as a defensive maneuver, it's more of offense. You're seeing a lot of drivers do it when it's a 2-car battle because they just want to stack the field up
and get away.
I'm gonna highlight. You talked about Enzo, and I think Enzo's been incredible all year long.
Enzo's a master at this.
He does an incredible job at doing that. He will block early on in the race, create chaos behind him, and then he'll put the pedal to the metal and he'll pull away and he'll win the race. And he's awesome at it. But drivers see that and then say, okay, I'm going to do it. And so rather than people white lining, usually it's one of those less than 5 to go, acceptable, 2.6 in the air, expect it. It's being seen 19 laps to go in the race when there's a 10, 15 car field. And it's being used as an offensive maneuver. And it's smart. Yeah. It's smart because they know as the leader of the pack that they cannot be moved unless the guy behind you decides, I'm tired of you. Yeah. I'm going to get a penalty to ruin your race. Yeah. And it's smart. I would do the same thing right now. If I was a driver in a KA field or an extra, whatever it is, but especially in the KAs where you see it the most often in a very packed sort of racing. If I'm the leader of the race, 15 to go, and I turn around, there's 10 guys behind me, I'm going to block. I'm going to block the whole racetrack, and I'm going to make sure that the second I, sense battling for second and third going on, hit my marks. I'm going to pull away by a second. You can't catch me.
Yeah. I think for me, white lining the strategy, like right now, not an issue. It's an annoying side of racing. I don't like it as much as pure side-by-side racing, but that's the cards we're dealt. And truthfully, the meta with this new tire and the meta with with this tire having so much grip is white lining. You can't get crossed over anywhere near as easily now. You can't get driven around the outside like we saw happen to Keeble in Cincinnati last year. So white lining's a little bit overpowered when it comes to the overall racecraft and the strength of it. So I don't really have an issue with it, at least in the current form. But I do have an issue with the late moves.
Yeah.
we've gotten closer and closer to the line of what is an acceptable block. And a lot of times you'll see, especially in pre-finals and the junior races, they'll back out of these moves where a senior guy will just ship it on them. Like if someone tries to run you all the way down to the grass and they're reactive in doing so, half the time in senior, you'll see the guy just drive straight through the guy into the next corner. And then they come off the track and they're like, oh, why'd you drive through me? It's like, well, you tried to drive me straight off the track in a straight line. Like, blocking and white lining is fine to a point, but if someone beats you to the spot, and by beating you to the spot, it's not the same as in a corner where you have to be like halfway up alongside them to have the corner, so to speak. If you're partially up alongside someone on a straight and you and they beat you to that spot, you can't block anymore. You can't go back over and try to chop in front of them. That doesn't work. And I saw it a lot in Cincinnati where it worked out to where coming out of the left-handed turn 11, you would see someone go low to block. They'd wash out wide. Someone would start the crossover. The guy would look over his shoulder and instantly kind of like sharp turn to the left. And it's not a full-blown swerve because the guy's not really alongside you, but it's a reactive move. And if the guy doesn't back out, if he doesn't kind of keep moving over, there's going to be a crash there. So that's where I say we need to adjust that. The white lining stuff, like, it's frustrating. I think it's kind of poor racecraft in terms of the amount of IQ it takes to pull it off. But, that's going to happen. There are guys that are experts at it that know how to do it well. They're going to win races. It's no different than dive bombs. It's no different than kind of racing one-on-one. You have guys that are good at it, guys that are bad on it. That will happen. But
I wanna highlight something real quick because I know we've talked about some of the younger drivers, and usually we don't. And what we say is no shade to some of the younger kids, whether it's mini, micro, X30, junior, K junior. A lot of these younger drivers see this in the senior categories and think it's okay, and that's why you're seeing it a lot now, more than ever, in the junior and younger categories. And so I don't blame anybody for doing it. And like you mentioned, I have nothing really wrong with the white lining. I just wanted to clarify kind of the point we're making.
Yeah.
That's why I talked about Enzo being so good at what he does on when he does white line the racetrack, because it's smart. If I was him, I'd do the same thing. We see Isambard do it all the time, or a lot of his wins have come from causing chaos, and
a lot
we
of his
see
penalties too.
But if you do it
That's
right
the
and don't get a
flip side.
penalty, the thing is with for example, like Alan, he's done a very good job in doing it. I think at Texas he had incredible pace, but in some of his other wins, he kind of caused some chaos behind him, then pulled away when people were battling for second and third. Got away with it a couple of times. He's gotten penalties. We saw it at Dalsman. But I think consistencies on penalties is kind of an issue. But like you said, I think the biggest thing, and it's not that we're seeing a lot of swerving incidents as much as we have, but we're seeing a lot of swerving where drivers are forced to back out, and so it's not getting called as a penalty, and so then the driver doing the swerving thinks it's okay to do it again, and I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
And by letter, it's not really a swerve. Like, it's not like,
Yeah.
I think of swerve. When I think of swerving, I think of a few incidents over the years, some more notable than others, that like someone looks to the right, cart's there, bam, right? This is much closer to the line, but I feel like all three of the series has let the line go further and further towards the swerving direction. Even if they're harsh on actual swerving, what they're letting people get away with in terms of late blocking has gotten more and more egregious, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, Alex, I want to go back to the kind of point you were saying about like our younger drivers. We definitely, want to talk about the younger drivers and racecraft or whatnot, but we want to be able to do that and kind of do that in a way where we're not like putting any of the drivers down, because that's definitely not our intention here. We want to talk about the racecraft of the sport and the sport as a whole, and we want to include those younger drivers as well, right? We want to include them in the talks of the stars of tomorrow. We want to talk about their races, and we want to be able to do that in a way where we can talk about it and kind of not hurt anybody or offend anybody, because that's definitely not our goal here, and that's definitely not what we're trying to do. But we definitely want to be able to do it where we can kind of help correct and guide the stars, the future stars, and some drivers who are already stars of our sport, right? So we don't want any of this to be kind of misunderstood, and we want to kind of guide everybody in a fine line to what we think is acceptable and what the series think is acceptable, and what we want to see out of racing as well. Because
Exactly.
at the end of the day, we're all fans. You know, we're all fans, and I go to a racetrack every weekend because I want to be there. I don't go to a racetrack every weekend because I'm forced to or because it's my job. I want to go there, and I want to go see racing, and I want to go see good racing. You know, I want to see clean racing when I go to a racetrack. So
we bring this up because not only are the three of us and everybody that works at Car Chaser at some point or another has driven a cart or a car, so we have experience in cars, but we're fans, right? We are race fans at the heart, at the core, and so when we see bad driving, it leaves a bad taste in our mouth, and it's a disappointing thing more than anything, and we don't want to see anybody get hurt because this is racing, and this is on a perfect day, we see an incredible race, 0 penalties. That rarely ever happens. And so we bring up, that's why we bring up the young kids sometimes, because we want to kind of teach them here's what is expected. We understand young, right? Still learning. And that's why they don't really get as much, I don't say negative talk, but as a young driver, I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things that I look back on and say, wow, I probably swerved that guy pretty bad, right? Like you're young. You see these senior guys or older guys doing it, you think it's okay. That's why we're bringing it up right now, to kind of say, listen, it's not really acceptable. We move on, and that's it. And so any driver that we have mentioned, I just want to say, this is no shade to anybody. It's just an example-based thing. That's why I mentioned Alan, and I'm sure if you talk to Alan personally, he'd probably say, listen, I've probably white-lined my fair share of races this year.
Funny enough that you bring that up, because I actually went to Alan, and I was like, dude, like, that's some of the craziest racing I've seen. Like, in all seriousness, I was like, and Alan knows this, I was like, I can't do any better in a K100 kart, but I don't think that was the smartest driving out there. And he went to me and wholeheartedly said, I know, I completely brain farted. I have no idea what I was doing out there. I was driving pretty stupidly. Well, it was word for word what he told me.
And that's actually what you want to hear from a senior guy. You want to hear that.
For sure.
I was talking again, our scale line conversation in Dowsman. I talked to him. And he said, "Yeah, I drove like a insert curse word that cannot be said on this show." You'll straight up tell you that, and I think that's like, again, it's not one driver. It's not a set of drivers that is the problem. It's not even really a
it's the standard.
The standard's the issue, and again, especially for the micro mini guys, it's not something that we're like, like these guys are doing an awful job. Like, if anything, the racecraft and the mini and the micro categories have been really good this year.
I spoke to I forgot who I was talking to after that micro race when Zane Burgess charged through the field. And that micro race, by the way, I know there was that incident on the last lap, but that was genuinely a racing incident between I forgot who it was.
Marcelo Flores, Francisco, and Jake Manali were on.
But that was a racing incident, battling for a podium or a win on the last lap, turn 5. Other than that, I forgot who I was telling, but the micro mini guys, it seems like they put on the most incredible races. They kind of get to junior, maybe start getting a little bit cocky, right? And then they kind of figure it back out at senior. But that seems, I always point at the micro mini kids and say, if you want to watch good racecraft, they do it better than anybody right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. 100%. I literally, I think in the stream I said to Xander, that was some of the most mature and some of the best racing that we've seen all weekend long. Because for some of those young drivers, the maturity that it takes to go out there and race and do it side by side and wheel to wheel was really incredible. Zane Burgess got a completely swerved Easton Kubinski at the end of that race. Whenever you're racing for a race win, the natural effect is, how do I slow this guy who has a much better run than me to the line? How do I slow him down? The natural answer is to move your hands a little bit to the right and slow him down. Definitely not what you want to see. Definitely not what you should do. And in no way am I telling anybody to do this, because it's a dirty move. But he could have completely done that. He's 8 years old. He could have done that. Maybe doesn't know any better, but kept his hands straight, knows what would happen if that did happen, and or if he did decide to do that. And it was a clean race, and it was probably the best race that we saw all weekend long. the
Yes.
best race that we saw all weekend long. And at such a young age, it definitely puts a smile on all of our faces. And it was really, really cool to see that race play out the way it did, and with all the racing action that it had. But we've gone into depth about this for about the last 23 minutes, 24 minutes. I think Emory's plugging in his computer right now. But Alex, the weekend as a whole for you at the Stars Championship Series, and kind of we talked about the first half of the year as well. How do you think it's been so far, and some of your big standouts while we wrap this one up?
It's been good. I think the racing's been awesome. I think this new compound that we're seeing, especially like we saw it at PKS, it's laying some rubber down, and that's what's awesome. And so I've talked to a lot of people, and I know we've kind of beat it into the ground almost, the idea of all these marbles on the racetrack and the grip on the racetrack, but it's created incredible racing, and I think it's added a kind of a wrench in the mix of things for a lot of drivers who maybe if you came into the sport about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, and you kind of got introduced to this compound that's a little bit, less rubber based, more of just it was kind of throwing it on the racetrack, not really adding grip as much. It took the whole weekend to get there. Whereas now, finally, we're back to like the rubber that we've seen from decades ago. It's what we see kind of over in the European side of things. A little less this year, but I'd say overall, it's awesome to see grippy racetracks again. And so I know a lot of marbles, but it's welcome to proper racetracks. And so I think that's been something that drivers have to, acclimate to. And you're kind of seeing the more experienced guys get up the pace faster. Now that we've had half a year of racing on it, they've definitely been a lot more accustomed to the new tire that we've seen. But that's one. I think besides, I think a couple races where the driving standard's been not great. It's been pretty good racing all year long.
Mm-hmm.
We've had close races throughout. So I think on our end, it's been entertaining. And for the viewers, I hope it's been awesome for them too. And then it's been the year of standout drivers. It's not been kind of a walkaway in any series, any class, right? This is not your classic. I know the PKS points look a little bit more spread out with Garrison having almost a 450 point lead now, but that also you got to include Norberg's issues, the DNF at Dallas. Been like, there's reasons why to Tullio as well. There's reasons why that championship's a little bit more wide open. From first to second, from second out of fifth, it's pretty close. But in shifter and the two shifter classes, in Stars a little bit more, but in Pro Tour, that's going to be incredible. Between mainly AJ and Morgado. And then in the Pro Tour for X30, it is anybody's game, top 5. So I think that kind of plays into the idea that this is not really a one-man show. This is you have no idea who's going to win this race going into the weekend sort of year. And so that's been awesome.
Yeah. Emory, I was telling Alex while we wrap this show up, episode number 19, these last 6 or 7 months, I guess you can call it now, as a whole, quick summary and, a little debrief or overall thoughts of the weekend at Stars, and just last couple things to wrap it all up.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we're in a really good spot when it comes to the sport of karting. I think we've seen a lot of good racing over the last few months. Alex mentioned the tire compound. Certainly on the MG Reds, I think it's been a lot of fun to drive that compound. It's a lot of fun to see guys just carry so much more speed. That's been good. The racecraft, look, I mean, we just spent 30 minutes harping on it, but at the end of the day, we've gotten some bangers, as Kaleb would like to say. We've had some really good races this year. I think, like Alex mentioned, the standout drivers have been very good, and the field parity, especially to me in X30, we now no longer have an RPG runaway, which we were a little bit concerned about at the start of the year. Joe Turney came in and won the one race he ran, but it wasn't a walkaway by any means. We've seen more kart manufacturers run at the front of the field in all of the categories than pretty much any other year in the last 5 years. That's a good thing. The engine parity, at least in X30, seems to be coming back a good bit. The KA engine parity, pretty good as well. So to me, there's a lot of positives from the start of this year. The entry numbers are as good as it's ever been, and I'm excited to see how this all plays up as we get set to go towards the stretch towards Vegas.
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely all leads to Vegas. The road to Vegas officially been underway for quite some time. Teams are already making posts of preparations they're making to start booking your arriving drives or whatnot. But it's been a great year for the sport. We've seen growth. We've had close to 300 entries across many, many different series, and it's definitely going to continue to grow, and we love to see it. You know, this was episode number 19 of Casey Grid Talk. Myself, Kaleb Yeska, Emory Lida, and Alexander Searle, all here and bringing you guys all the action. It's been an absolute pleasure, boys, and we'll give a round of applause. It's episode number 19 being done and dusted here, but we'll be back next week with more, I guess, grid talk about the SCUSA Pro Tour. Emory, go ahead.
Yeah, and also make sure to stay tuned because Big Red has his podcast, Xander Clemens podcast, coming up. And
I was getting there. Don't think I forgot.
I was stressed, okay. But anyways, you can continue, Caleb.
No, but I'll continue here with our little outro going on, little outro music. But Xander Clemens is going to be live here in a couple of minutes' time, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, I should say, to talk about his, I guess, quarterly year appearance on podcast platforms, to talk about what he's got on his mind. So definitely tune into that later on tonight. That's we can call it a late show with Xander Clemens coming here shortly. But from all of us here at Grid Talk, we appreciate you guys for joining us and hearing us yap and hear us talk about the sport that we love so much. From all of us here at Grid Talk, thank you for joining us here tonight. We'll see you back next week when we take on the preview to the SCUSA Pro Tour. Have a good night.